Hi, good morning. Thank you for joining. We are excited to talk about programming today. So I kind of jotted down some notes because we had some questions. So Sam also let me know if I miss any questions. So I'll have that, move that so I can see it too. And we're going to just kind of talk through programming, some things that are important to our programming also. And then if you guys have any questions, put them in the chat, or we'll obviously continue the conversation too, ongoing, if you have any that we didn't get to also. I think the biggest thing, maybe we'll just talk about kind of overview first. So we have had questions about, and I think a lot of people that come to our programming are coming from like a CrossFit background where they're doing something new every single day they work out. A lot of variety, which is super fun and different than how we're programming, which is, I would say 90% more of like a traditional weight training template. We have a little bit of CrossFit style training kind of sprinkled throughout, more of like the glycolytic work in there, but it's definitely not the meat and potatoes of our programming. And why is that? So the most important thing to us is for you all that are doing our programming to have results, to build muscle specifically, to achieve hypertrophy. And that can be done a number of ways, but one of the biggest factors in hypertrophy training is to create mechanical tension. So that's going to be in the eccentric and the concentric phase of the lift. So for example, the eccentric would be like the descent. So think of a squat when you're coming down would be the eccentric, driving out of that squat would be the concentric. And so we can achieve mechanical tension in both depending on the muscle group that we're working. And then also neurological is a part of it too. There's a lot of neurological, like on, let's say, a max deadlift, right? Much less on like hamstring curls. So that's just fatiguing your central nervous system. And we want to incorporate that. But if we did all of our work there, then we'd feel terrible. But also we wouldn't necessarily achieve hypertrophy optimally. We want to have a good mix, and then of the metabolic stress as well, like that pump that you get during the workout, creating the muscle damage, which is essentially just tears in your muscle fibers. And that's why it's important to also rest. That's why we're not doing like 4 lower body days back to back, because as that happens, we have that muscle damage happen. That recovery is really important to grow and achieve hypertrophy, which is just building muscle, building lean tissue. So another important part of that is going to be progressive overload. And I don't like to say that our programming is progressive overload, because really progressive overload is like the outcome of what you're doing. And so how you achieve progressive overload, though, we think that through a lot in our programming design. It's going to be just making your workouts harder over time. And you can achieve that a number of different ways. So the load on the bar or your dumbbell weight, the volume, like the amount of sets and reps that you're doing, and then also the resistance, like increasing that over time, maybe through tempo or load, and then the time, like total time also. So we can make your workouts harder in a number of ways. And that is what's going to continue to push you to challenge yourself each week and build muscle. The one thing that I want to know, you can achieve hypertrophy by doing different things every day, but it's going to be harder to track. It's going to be harder to measure. It's also going to be harder to know if you are achieving that hypertrophy. And so when we design our programming, we do have it, like a lot of things you'll notice will repeat. Like you'll be doing the same movement patterns week to week, really for like 6 weeks to 12 weeks, potentially, depending on the lift. Usually at the 6-week mark, we'll change certain lifts and different things that we think are going to be great alternative exercises, but you'll probably see like a squat variation, a deadlift variation almost all the time. And the reps are going to be changing. The tempo is going to be changing. Different things are going to be changing to keep it interesting to you. But a lot of those compound lifts you'll see very regularly, where we'll change out more of like the isolated work more often. And talking about that, like, why do we have repetitive movements? That's going to feel really boring for some people potentially. If you're coming from a CrossFit background where like variety is what you love. And the reason why really is because it's effective. You're going to be able to see results. You're going to be able to really easily track your progress over time by increasing weight or increasing reps and like see that improvement. But then also you're going to have the neurological efficiency that comes from doing the same movement patterns over and over again. It's going to really allow you to improve your form over time. If you're doing them regularly, you're going to get more efficient with the movement. And that's going to allow you to be able to push more weight and build muscle more effectively. Also, I think that a lot of, whether you're a beginner or an expert, like level of lifting, we can all benefit from having those repetitive movements. And also I think training, we want your training to be fun, and we like to provide some variety there so that it is fun and interesting. But most importantly, we want you to get results. And so that's what we're thinking of when we're designing programming, is first and foremost, giving you results. And then also like, how can we provide variety and make this fun and interesting as well? Sam, did you have something to say?
Yeah, just coming from like, anatomy standpoint, like we do a lot of these compound lifts because that's like, we have to train our muscles. Sometimes we have to train our muscles in the shortened position, and sometimes we have to train the muscles in the lengthened position. So like for our hamstrings, they're going to get most of the benefit from getting the stimulus of the lengthened position. So think of an RDL, you're getting that long stretch. Whereas like quads, we tend to need to be in the shortened position longer. That's where you're going to get the most tension. So a lot of those progressive lifts, like, a squat, or like if you're at a gym, like a leg press or a hack squat, a hip thrust, like the hip thrust will be training the glutes in a shortened position, a little bit of both. And we need those things repeatedly, because that's just, again, where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. So we might, keep squats in there a lot of times, but maybe we're going to elevate our heels, because that's going to put a little bit more focus on our quads as opposed to our glutes. Maybe we're going to add a tempo. So again, we're changing the stimulus slightly and changing the reps slightly, but the movement pattern is going to be the same. You're training your glutes, you're training your, not much hamstrings, but your glutes and your quads in the squat. And the same thing with RDLs. Like, we're going to change the tempo a little bit. Maybe we're going to move from a dumbbell to a regular. Maybe we're going to do, a split stance versus regular, whatever. But you just get the most bang for your buck in keeping the meat and potatoes, those compound lifts, and maybe just changing the stimulus a little bit by changing the tempo, changing the rest period, changing the pause at the bottom, or changing, again, like heels elevated, and so on.
Yes. Does anyone have any questions on any of that so far? I don't think so. So one thing you guys will see in our programming a lot is RPE, right? So the reason why we don't just tell you like 195 pounds for men, 45, 35 pounds for women, like in a CrossFit workout. Hi. We don't give you that weight because, and then also beyond that, we don't give you a percentage either, is because we have all levels doing our programming. So we have people that have never lifted before up to people that have lifted for 10 plus years doing our programming. So if we gave you the weight, it would be like impossible to know if people are achieving the optimal RPE, which is the rate of perceived exertion. So how hard the lift is. So sometimes we'll give you a weight if it's like max reps and we think it's kind of a universal weight everyone can use. But rarely you'll see us give you a weight, and that's why. And same for percentage base. If I have a group of people that I know are conditioned athletes and they've been training and I know that they're lifting well, their movement patterns are good, I could give them a percentage to go off of and I feel pretty confident. But since we have beginners, like very wide range of clients and subscribers, percentage-based system doesn't really work either, because some of us are going to be way more efficient with moving and can move 70% really well, and some of us can't. So that's why we don't give you that. And that's why you're going to have to take a little bit of like, be actually tuned in to how your muscle is feeling and use that RPE to determine how hard you should go or how much weight you should put on the bar. And what we're usually looking for, and also what's really important for achieving hypertrophy, for building muscle, is to be at that high RPE, like really pushing like as hard as you can on most lifts, at least by the last set. So for example, we might say RPE 9 to 9.5. What does that mean? So and I wanted to talk through this because I think a lot of people can have a different idea. Like a 9 to me might be so different than what a 9 is to you, depending on how your number scale in your head works. So just talking through like at Hungry Fitness, what RPEs, what those mean for us. So I would say we're rarely ever going to be below an 8. So an 8 RPE would probably be like, okay, it's 3 sets of 10. When I hit 10, I could probably go to like 15, 14 before I just completely fail at this. So it's like, it's a little bit challenging, but definitely not fatiguing you much. And you could probably do, instead of 3 sets of 10, you could probably do like 7 sets of 10 at that weight. So it's rare that we'll do an 8 RPE. You might find like on that first set, oh, that felt like about an 8 RPE. I'm going to put the weight up for this next set. And so I can hit 9. And so a 9 RPE would be on maybe a set of 10 reps. You feel like you could do 12, and that would be about failure, maybe 13. So like maybe 2 reps left in the tank, 2.5. And then a 9.5 RPE, which is kind of like that perfect sweet spot, is you complete all 10 reps with really good form, and maybe one more rep, 1.5 would be like total failure for you. So that's like, I feel really confident in my form. I feel strong in this lift, but like those last 2 to 3 reps on a set of 10, I'm like struggling. I'm slowing down, but I'm getting them in. And I feel like I can complete that 10th rep with good form still. A 10 RPE would be like you got those 10 reps in and it just took your soul basically, but you were able to still do them with good form. Or maybe you hit failure and you know, like, okay, 10 is really only on that final set that I want that happening, unless we have enough rest where you're able to fully recover and hit 10 again. But usually like 3 sets of 10 on squats would look like a 9 RPE on your set 1, a 9.5 on your set 2, and then 9.5 on your set 3 for squats, just because that's going to be, I don't really want you hitting failure on a squat. That's going to be bailing with the bar, which is fine. It happens. But usually on a squat, something like that, where the weight's on your back, that 9.5 RPE is great. Unless you have a spotter, then go for a 10. Or if you feel confident, really confident with lifting, go for a 10. But on something that's like an isolated movement, say like, what would be a good example? I'm just
like if you did a hamstring curl.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Or like leg extensions or hamstring curls, let's say. Then hitting, that's going to be obviously like a gym movement, but think of a leg extension, for example. So you're hitting your quads, you're on the machine, you're pushing your legs up. Like you can go to failure, and the worst thing that's going to happen is, okay, you just put the pad goes back down, right? You're not like, you can totally burn out that muscle, and you're also not really taxing your central nervous system a ton. Like you're isolating that muscle, you're feeling a really good pump, and you're just going to failure with that lift. So on something like a leg extension or a hamstring curl, you could do a 10 RPE if you could recover and hit that weight again. If you hit a 10 RPE on like your second set of 4, you're probably going to have to drop the weight down on that next set. Like if you go to failure, you're probably not going to recover in time to do that weight again in 90 seconds. So that's usually a good indication. If I hit 10 RPE on like the first or second set, I'm like, okay, I got to lower the weight a little bit so I can continue to do with good form on these next 2 to 3 sets or whatever it is.
And then just talking a little bit more about RPE and what it feels like. So it's going to take a lot of concentration. Like you're going to have to really be present in how things are feeling. You kind of have to grind it out a little bit. It's going to be challenging. It's going to take a lot of mental focus. There was something else I was going to say too, and now I lost it.
I think it's important. I think it's important too, to go back to why we repetitively do these movements, because I think it takes time to learn okay, this is now I'm at failure, but you're not going to just do a new movement one day and know that you can push yourself to failure. So it's almost like practice. It takes practice and training and practice and knowing your limit of what you can push. Just like you said, Michaela, okay, I hit that and I was at failure. So my next set, I'm going to drop it down. Now I know I'm at a 9, but you've probably done that lift for 2 months, so
Oh yeah.
that's another reason why that repetitive outlook of those movements coming in is so important, because you have to practice them. It's just like anything else.
To develop that neurological efficiency
Yes.
too with the movement. Like that usually takes like 2 to 3 weeks before that's there. So
and some people just naturally don't have it in them. Like we were talking about this earlier, like some people, it takes a lot to learn about yourself and learning how far you can actually push yourself. Sometimes it feels mentally like you're close, but really in reality, physically, you could do more. Whereas like myself and probably Michaela were like, we kind of have to step back sometimes because we want to push a little bit too hard and it's not necessarily needed. So again, repeating that movement, getting to know yourself and how you respond, and like asking yourself those questions. Am I mentally like, am I just feeling like this is hard, or physically am I seeing like leg extension? Are my quads like quivering? Like it's, it's hard. So the more we do it, the more you can get in tune with how that feels, what that looks like for you as well.
Yeah. And I think one thing to mention too, because we get asked this a lot, is why aren't we adding weight? Why are we adding reps, right? And so when we're thinking through programming, we're thinking of an entire population of people. A lot of them are working out at home. We're just starting the commercial gym track. So that'll be easier for us to add weight for all of those people that are at the commercial gym, because it's as easy as like putting the pin in the next weight or grabbing that, next set of dumbbells. You have endless supplies. But even at the gym, dumbbells go up by 5 pounds. And so if I'm doing a lateral raise, I'm not going to be able to go from 10-pound dumbbells to 15s from one week to the next, or even probably in that 6-week period. Like that might be really challenging. So usually to create that progressive overload, to keep challenging you, we'll add reps, especially on an upper body workout or upper body lift. I mean, because we are most often using dumbbells on a lot of those upper body lifts. So anytime we're using a dumbbell, we will usually be progressing in reps, unless we feel like it's been enough time that we could maybe make a weight increase. Where if we're using a barbell, then most often, which most lower body movements, we are using a barbell. If we're using a barbell, then we will usually have you add weight and keep the rep scheme the same or close to the same, so that you can just add those 2.5-pound plates or 5-pound plates and increase from there. And it's much more doable to do. So if you're wondering why are some movements increasing in reps, why are some increasing in weight, we're thinking through equipment limitations, and also just it's, our body can add 5 pounds on our legs can add 5 pounds, where our upper body, shoulders, it's going to be 1 pound is going to be huge to add. So it's all relative there too. And so keeping that in mind as well. If you had questions on that. And then in addition to that, hypertrophy can be achieved in many different rep ranges. So we are trying to hit a little bit of kind of everything. And depending on what phase you're in, we may be more on the low rep ranges or the high volume rep ranges. We have a different focus kind of every 12 weeks, really. And so you'll notice, for instance, summer was a lot more metabolic in our training. We had a lot more volume in reps. So it was going to be lighter weight and usually shorter rest ratios too. And so people that jumped in on summer were like, "Whoo, this is a really high volume." We're now coming into fall, we're doing a lot lower rep schemes and adding in more tempo work or just different types of load in that regard, like in mechanical tension, and how we achieve that too. So keep with us, and every 12 weeks, you'll definitely have a new focus on the mesocycle, but within the 6 weeks, things will stay relatively the same. We do change up different things, especially on the accessory work. But the nice part about that is then you know what to expect. You're going to have the same primer for 6 weeks. So you'll know, get in lower body day. I could just hit that warm up. It's targeted. I feel confident with it. I get better at it over the 6 weeks and feel really good. And then hit your lifts, and you know what to expect. You can move through your workout efficiently. You're not having to look up each movement and try to figure out what each new movement is every single day. So we want to save you guys time, because all of our clients are busy, and I think generally speaking have a lot going on. And so we want you to be able to get into the gym or get into your garage or go to your living room and get your workout done quickly. And not have to learn a lot of new things. But each new cycle, we do like to introduce new things so that you have, something new and a novelty experience too.
And just coming back to our why, like our why is we want you to look good, we want you to feel good. And so, a lot of that's going to be repeating. Like this isn't necessarily a CrossFit program where we're changing everything, and that's fun to do and fun to add. But that's why we program the way we do, because we want you to look good, we want you to feel good. It's not about we're not training for powerlifting, or we're not training for certain, competition. It's just to look good and to feel good. And
yes. And I think saying along those lines, like feel good, that's really important. People, I would say from like 20 to 70 do our workouts, but the bulk of our subscribers are in their 30s and 40s and have high stress jobs. Their parents, they are doing a lot. Like stress is generally pretty high for our population of clients. And so we want your programming to elicit a stress response that's going to benefit you and help you build muscle, but not tax your central nervous system so much that you are exhausted and fatigued, and your sex hormones are now affected, thyroid is affected, like all those things. Your internal health is also important to us. And so when we're programming for you, we're thinking, okay, how can we achieve growth, muscle growth with causing as little stress on you as we can, because we know you have all these other stressors, because our bodies aren't going to be able to differentiate between oxidative stress from our workouts and like social and work stress. It's just all stress. And so most people can only handle so much stress before they're having negative adaptations. I'd say all people. And so that's something we think about too. How can we program in a way to where we're building muscle and stressing our bodies in a good way, but not too much stress? And so we provide different options, like optional days, cardio days, different things like that. And it's kind of up to you to decide what the right amount of volume is for you. But keeping that in mind, if you're always sore, too much volume. Like if you're doing the physique 65 days a week and you're always sore, then drop it down to physique 30 or cut off the optional day and just do 4 days a week and see how you feel. Like a little soreness the next day is normal. But if you're sore multiple days later, then volume is too high. So that's something to consider.
More sleep and more food. Get more sleep, eat more
that
food
too.
as well. If you don't want to cut back your training, then
yes.
you have to pull yourself out. You need to eat more and you need to sleep more.
Yes.
And then
it's not always better.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm just saying. Like there is too much volume when it comes to muscle growth too. Like your return on investment starts to go down once you reach a certain threshold of volume. And we're trying to keep that in mind as well. So again, more is not always better. We're going to be doing ourselves a disservice, both muscularly, internally, and just in general, if we are throwing on way too much volume and our body's telling us, I can't handle this.
Yeah. And I think high achievers are what tend to be, like, I would say if I could kind of categorize our subscribers, most of you are very high achievers. So it's never about like you're lazy or you're not doing enough. Usually I would say 9 times out of 10, it's okay, let's scale this back so you can see results, because right now you're doing too much. And I think, I think a lot of times we compare and we think about what everyone else is doing, or, and think maybe it's not enough. I think, but just recognizing you can achieve, some of the strongest people I know lift 4 days a week, sometimes even 3 days a week. And so you can achieve hypertrophy without lifting 6 days a week. I think that's really important to remember too. I lift 4 days a week and I am still building muscle. So I personally do the same lifts with like the same rep schemes for months on end. And so 6 weeks of kind of having some things repeat is really not that long. And if you talk to most experienced lifters, like that's what they're doing. And so I think it's easy to think like, I need more variety, because that's what we see on social media. But just kind of thinking, coming back to why, like, what is my why? Why am I doing this programming? What, when I'm going into the weight room, like, what do I want to achieve here? And hopefully you want to achieve muscle growth and increasing in strength too. So.
And Michaela, just to like finish off, we had one question in the group about, I think we talked about it earlier, but why do we do like upper lower split versus full body, and a little bit about abs, touching on abs.
Yeah, so full body splits are great. We've kind of gone back and forth on like the 3-day week programming a full body split, and we've come to upper lower. I think just with our population, having it broken up into lower and upper, it's most effective because we have people doing lots of different things. And so I think people like to have like a actual lower body day and an actual upper body day, depending on maybe if they're doing endurance work or CrossFit work. It gives more flexibility, I think, in that way. But if you wanted to just train both, that's totally fine. There's just some considerations there as far as like back-to-back days lifting. So if you're doing 2 full body sessions, let's say Monday, Tuesday, like that's what I do right now. I do Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, and I usually will incorporate some upper body on 3 of those days and lower body on all 4 of those days. So that's how I'm currently training, and I can split up my volume that way. But I am definitely prioritizing like glutes and hamstrings one day and more quad focused another day. So you're not hitting like just completely wrecking your hamstrings on Monday and then going back and doing hamstring work on Tuesday. So there's some different considerations, and I wouldn't say, and there's pros and cons to both. But just with our subscribers, that's kind of what has felt like the best option for the most people. So that's why we've stuck to lower upper splits. But that's not to say that won't ever change in the future too. And then did you ask?
If you guys are wanting full body, like, I mean, personally, I do full body right now because I'm only supposed to be training 3 days a week because I'm focusing on some internal things. So, full body can be good if you're working out, say, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But again, most of our subscribers, when we pull them, they're, working out 4 to 5 days a week. Therefore, the lower upper split is just more beneficial. But if we see a need for it in the future, where people are wanting to do 3 a day, 3 workouts a day, or don't want that muscle group focus, they'd rather do full body, like we're open to adapting that and possibly creating like a full body 3-day week option. But you guys need to give us that input, because if we don't know there's a need, then we can't provide that service for you as well.
Yes, and we definitely we have created a lot more options for you guys for this fall with the Physique 60, Physique 30, and then we have the commercial 60, which we will soon be having a commercial 30, and then the accessory track, which is great for like if you're an endurance runner, or maybe you love to do CrossFit, but you just want a little bit of hypertrophy based training throughout the week to progress on. That would be a good option, like 15 to 20 minutes there. So those are kind of our main needs that we felt like we needed to fill, but we have more coming. One program that we're kind of working on, which wouldn't be a subscriber, it'd probably be like an add-on, would be like an endurance track. Like if you were training for a race, then we would load it from the beginning. Obviously, that's something that our programming does too, is you'll notice every 6 weeks it changes. We like everyone to be on the same week because there is a sense of community with that. If we all know we had to do the 50 lunges that day together, then we can discuss that and talk about that. I come from CrossFit, and that's something that I loved about CrossFit, is like everyone's experiencing that same workout. And so I wanted to create that kind of on this type of weightlifting. And it's progressive overload. So really it doesn't matter if you join week 1 or week 3, you're going to be progressing, but then you're going to change to a new. So it's okay if you start the programming on week 2 or week 3, you don't need to like go back to the beginning, because if you stay with us, and you're going to always be continuing to progress forward. So that was one thing to know, and why we do that also, why we don't just start you on day 1 or whatever it is. So that was something I wanted to say. And there was a question on abs as well. And yes, I would say the answer is yes. I've gone back and forth on programming core work because we do a lot of compound lifts. And so if you're pushing heavy weight there, you're going to be building your core muscles. However, we have had requests for it too. And so I think we have programmed it as optional. It's totally optional. You don't need to do it by any means. And abs do come down to genetics, as well as being at a lean enough body fat to see your abs. And everyone's different. Like me at 15% body fat and someone else at 15% body fat, like you might see my abs and not see their abs, just because where we carry our body fat, right? For me, my core is like usually the leanest part of my body. For other people, that might be the last place they lose body fat. And so keeping that in mind, like abs might not ever be in the picture for you, depending, it might not be worth it to be as low of body fat as you need to be to get abs. But also we can target those rectus muscles too. And so that's something that we're going to probably kind of start implementing a little bit more in the future too. I'm kind of testing that out right now as well, on just specifically like working those 6-pack muscles. I think when people say, are we doing core? That's what they mean, and is what we're realizing. And so that's something that we may be incorporating as well too. So if you guys have any more questions, let us know. And we're just very excited to have you in the programming, whether you're a one-on-one client or you're a subscriber. And we have a lot of ideas and things coming this year to continue to grow our programming and just get better. So any feedback we love. Just shoot us a direct message, or you can do it in the group or email us, whatever works best for you. And as you're doing the workouts, keep tagging us. We'd love to see that too, and just hear how you're progressing as well, and any wins that you have. So thanks for joining today, and hope you guys have a good week.